Hello, I'm Jordan Peterson. I'm a psychologist and a notorious over-talker. As worm self, you're not supposed to interrupt.
Actually, I was just going to ask if...
You know, every time I do an interview, the interview is always political. It's always political.
Well, the clue is in the title of this programme. We are the Daily Politics.
No, fair enough. No, look, fair enough. I think people are carbohydrate poisoning themselves like they can't believe. Very discombobulating.
There was plenty of motivation to take me out. It just didn't work.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to because it's just so goddamn funny. I can't help but say it. I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors. Women mate hypergamously. I think that's what Jung was trying to discover, by the way.
Who is your favourite author?
Dostoevsky.
Who's your favourite female author?
Dostoevsky.
I hear the respect argument all the time, but you also can't force me to respect you. You might be able to force me to act like I respect you, but you can't force me to respect you. It's just not possible. Uh-oh.
Good morning, Citizen Peterson.
You got a short one?
Yeah, I do.
I mean a question?
Saved the best question for last. Trust me, this one's good. But first, I'll break the ice. You know, many people have stated no icebreaker. You want me to get right into the real question?
I want you to get right into the question.
Right.
So, for example, when I look at this, whatever it is, bottle. That's the word. Cute chick. I learned that mostly from Jung. In fact, I think that's virtually a direct quote from Carl Jung. Your testosterone levels. It's all, no, my team lost. You know, it's like there'll be nothing in it for the wife tonight. You know. When the Delphic Oracle proclaimed that Socrates was the wisest man in Greece, in Athens, and in Greece.
Are there differences between men and women? Yes, Kermit, there are. Sorry, I'm not much of a puppeteer.
Even funny, and I'm not really accustomed to being slower than someone else in the room. And so I didn't know this until really quite recently, until I wrote 12 Rules for Life. Socrates said that he had a daemon, and by which he meant an internal voice. And hopefully we're back. Let's see. There's another idea. This is an archetypal idea about the image of the Savior, the Messiah. The Messiah is the person who takes the sins of the world onto himself. That's a classic archetypal idea. It's like, what does that mean? It means that you look for the motivations that drove Hitler in yourself. Because it isn't even obvious that we're after comfort. I mean, what do you want? You want to just lay in a feather bed and eat peeled grapes all day? I mean, maybe for an hour or so, that might not be a bad idea, but, you know, it's going to get dull pretty quick. You're going to go out looking for trouble. Like, don't be taking notes during the lecture, exactly. Because then you're not listening to the lecture. It's like, listen to the lecture and then take notes afterwards. Now, that doesn't work for every discipline, but it certainly works for disciplines. Like students in my lectures, I always tell them, don't take notes during the lecture. Listen to the damn lecture. You can take notes afterwards, because what that does is force you to practice remembering.
There's a logical problem with it too that's even worse. And so you might be noticing that the LGBT set of acronyms keeps growing, eh? And it's kind of a form of its own parody in some sense. It's like, well, I'm oppressed. It's like, yeah, you are. And well, I'm oppressed too. Yeah, you're also oppressed. And maybe I'm even oppressing you, being part of this other marginalized group, but at least we share our oppression. Well, I'm also oppressed. Well, so am I. I'm oppressed too. It's like...
Because you could think that in some sense you just own yourself, you know? Because people do kind of make that claim, especially when they're trying to justify, for example, their right to suicide, that, you know, it's your life, it's your body, you're yours to do what you will with. And if that was true, well, then it would seem to me that life would be a lot more straightforward, because you would just tell yourself things that you would instantly obey and believe. So first of all, you'd tell yourself all the things that you were going to do, and then you just run off and do them, which you don't, obviously.
This is not widespread knowledge. It was funny because I revealed this finding. You know, I didn't discover this, I read about it, but I talked to my graduate students about it. I used to take them out for breakfast, you know, and they were a very contentious, snappy bunch. And they were always trying to one-up each other, and they were quite witty. And for like 6 months, until it got very annoying, every time one of them one-upped the other, they'd stretch themselves out and like snap their hands like... I used to like, you know, if you take a pillow, and you go like this 3 times, right? That means look out, a pillow is coming your way. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, whap! And she looked, she was completely dismayed at me. It's like, what do you do that for? And I thought, well, I eventually taught her that rule. The other thing I used to do... The other thing I used to do, you know, is sometimes she'd come at me like this when we were playing around, and I'd grab her wrists and I'd knock her hands, her knuckles together, and she used to just get completely annoyed about that. And I thought, right? That's what you do. You just open your hands. Well, she didn't know that either, so she hadn't been played with enough when she was a little rat.
Now, I certainly have noticed that as I've got older and have done things, what would you say, accomplished isn't exactly the right word. I've participated in many things that I'm pleased to have participated in them, but wouldn't necessarily go back and participate in them again. It's sort of as if when you do something and you finish it, it's as if it's done. You don't have to do it again. And maybe it's possible, who knows, that if you finish your life, whatever that might mean, if you exhaust your life, then that's enough life, you know, that you've had enough.
And the reason for that is that, and this is why I get a kick out of all the Kekistan boys, you know, I do believe that we're in a period of chaos.
With a Pepe flag.
Oh, I can't believe you brought that up.
And so I would say with regards to fiction, if you take someone like Dostoevsky, who I think is a favorite of mine, by the way, I would highly recommend that you read all 5 of his great novels, because they are unparalleled in their psychological depth. And so if you're interested in psychology, Dostoevsky's the person for you. Tolstoy's more of a sociologist, but Dostoevsky, man, he gets right down into the bottom of the questions and messes around. Transformative reading. Anyways.
And then there's the idea that, you know, that Marx had, that religion was the opiate of the masses, which doesn't exactly sound like... I've always thought religion was the opiate of the masses, but communism, Marxism was the methamphetamine of the masses, let's say. Yeah. And they were sitting around talking about how they were feminists, roughly speaking, and they were talking when I walked in about the fact that neither of them were going to take their husband's last name when they got married. And Tammy, my wife, I think, said to her friend, well, that really means I'm going to have to find some wimp and marry him. And she turned around and looked at me and smiled evilly and said, hey, Jordan, do you want to get married? And of course I'd heard the whole conversation, and you know, she knew I liked her, obviously, and so that was a nice little comical dig. She has a very vicious sense of humor, and you know, I kind of laughed and I thought, ha ha ha, okay, yeah, okay, so fine. So then I was like 28, and she had come to see me in Montreal, and we were talking about getting married, and she said, we were talking about what that would mean, and then we started talking about what the name would be, and I said, hey, I've got a story for you. Remember when you were 13 and I was delivering papers to your house? And because I suggested that she take my last name, and she wasn't so sure about that, and I said, well, you remember that little story, that little episode that we had when you were 13, and I came over to your house and you told me that you weren't going to take your husband's name and that you're going to have to marry some wimp? Said, okay, well, here I am, but, if we're going to get married, you're going to take my name. And that's the end of that argument. And so, she had the good graces to go along with that, but that was actually, extraordinarily comical and ridiculous. So that's a good one. I have some notes, which I don't usually use, but I'm going to use them tonight because I haven't got everything about this particular notion memorized in some sense yet, because I'm still working it out, but that should work out okay. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, well, good. So Windows worked. That's always good. I've seen it not work sometimes when Bill Gates demonstrates it, and that's got to be very, very embarrassing. Although I would say, all things considered, he seems to have done quite well. And make sure you eat protein and fat and not carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are basically poisonous.
It's not an accident that the axiomatic Western individual is someone who was unfairly nailed to a cross and tortured. It's like, yes, right, exactly. So what do you do about that? Well, I thought about that for a long time too.
Bye-bye. Now I have to figure out how to shut this off. First blank shot, then done. Bye-bye.